Windows is way more complicated to install now than it used to be, so it's time for a new guide. And by the way, which one do you choose? Well, let's talk about all that right now. So we're gonna walk you through basically how to install Windows, how to create media for it, and then even a cheap way to get Windows so you're paying a fraction of the cost, which is completely legit. Let's kick it off with the most important question, which is, which version of Windows do I need to install? Do I splurge and spend the extra money on Windows Pro, or do I spend the money on Windows Home? There's a nifty little guide that Microsoft prepared. When you're going through here, you can actually see that for the most part, Pro and Home do almost the exact same thing, except for these things right here, which is BitLocker and Windows Information Protection. What BitLocker is it allows you to encrypt drives if you do something like Bitcoin mining or key encryption, or you care about the data that's actually on your drive. That's where BitLocker could be a big deal. Very, very cool. That's why this requires TPM 2.0, which is the security measure that's on all those motherboards, which is required for Windows 11. It's so you can do BitLocker just like this. If you're gonna do 128 gigs or less of RAM, then Windows Home will work completely fine. If you're gonna do over 128 gigs of RAM, then you're gonna have to go to Windows Pro. So that's the only hardware limitation. Outside of that, if you don't care about that, then there's no potential reason to move to Windows 11 Pro. A lot of people think that Pro does things like gives you better access to games at the hardware access level or anything like that. That is actually not true. What it does have is things like group policy management, domain joining, things for enterprise or business that you may need if somebody needs to remote access your machine, or you need to do certain policy things over mobile, etc. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then more than likely you don't need it. If all this is for gaming, then Windows 11 Home is gonna do everything you need. So that should give you a good idea of Windows 11 Home versus Windows 11 Pro. How do I create a drive that allows me to install Windows 11? And it's pretty cool. So, but in here we're gonna put create Windows 11 installation media, and then right there at the top is create installation media for Windows, which we're gonna open up here. So I'm gonna go down here and click on Windows 11. And then you can see that there's two options here. There's Installation Assistant, and what this is for installing it on the device you're using, which you don't want to do, or you can do what's called Create Windows 11 Installation Media, which is what we want to do. Now, in order to create Windows Installation Media, I'm going to go ahead and hit Download Now, and it's going to download this application. And then you're just going to go ahead and hit Open File, and hit Yes. And then you're going to get this acceptable notice of license and terms. And you know you didn't read this. It's like the biggest lie in history. I've read and accepted these terms. Nobody has. Okay, so now what you need is a portable USB device, or if you have a DVD burner or CD burner, you can install it onto a DVD or CD. And we're not covering that in here. So few people have it that really what we're gonna focus on is if you have a USB device. I'm gonna use USB-C. Now, if it doesn't have USB-C, you're gonna have to use your more traditional USB-A, the one that you're typically used to. You just need to make sure that you have 8 gigabytes of room on this in order for it to work. Plug it into your PC before you hit next. Once it's all plugged in, go ahead and hit accept. It's gonna get a few things ready, which just basically means it's getting, pulling in where it's gonna download from, etc. See where it says you can use recommended options for this PC? If you want to uncheck this, you wanna just make sure it says if you're gonna do a different language, you can. I'm gonna select English, you're gonna do Windows 11, you're gonna hit next. This is where I was talking about you can use it for a DVD or a USB flash, and there it says it has to have at least 8 gigabytes. We're gonna use a USB flash drive. There is my removable drive right there, Kingston, and I'm gonna hit next. And then you're just gonna wait. And at the end of this, when it's all said and done, you're gonna have it ready to go Windows installation media that we will then move over to the PC that we're gonna set up and then walk you through that process. Go to your motherboard website, download your latest BIOS, and update your BIOS to the latest version. And then once that's done, you can then continue your Windows installation. First thing we're gonna do is when you boot your PC, you're going to hit the BIOS. And what you're gonna do is as it's booting, you're gonna hit delete and F2 on the keyboard, and eventually you'll end up in a screen. It may not look like this. This is an MSI screen, but for every motherboard, whether that's Gigabyte, Asus, ASRock, Aorus, etc., they're all gonna have a different looking BIOS. We wanna make sure that this thing is either called XMP or DOCP, or it will say Expo, and make sure that it is essentially off. And just to have the best Windows experience, we wanna make sure everything there is turned off. If you're gonna be installing Windows over itself, you're using this guide to to reinstall Windows, then you may need to erase your drives. Now here's the thing, I do not recommend non-clean installs of Windows. These have a tendency to get pretty messy after a while. So if you can, I would have backed up my files, put them all in a second location, and reinstall Windows and erase the drive. And a lot of BIOSes actually have the ability to do this from within the BIOS. So here you can see, if I went to F7, I go to Settings, and I go to Advanced, you can see this thing that says Secure Erase. What this would do is this would load a separate app, and then I can erase the drives, which I've done in this case. And then from there, when you then restart, it'll act like there is no OS or whatever on there. If you are not going to do this and you don't want to listen, you just want to change your boot priority, you can, and it'll be different for every BIOS, but you can move these around to basically say, hey, like this is going to be the USB is going to be the first thing I boot from, etc. So there's a bunch of different options here. You just need to find the one and set it as a priority for what you want to basically boot Windows. But I've got everything ready here. So I'm going to hit F10 and I'm going to say, mine's going to say I didn't change anything because I didn't. Hit yes. And now it's going to boot to Windows 11, the USB drive, and then we'll kick off the process from there.
A few minutes later.
We are now ready. We are in Windows. This is the Windows installation media. You can see right here we have a couple options, so we'll just kick it through here. Now we are going to do Windows 11 Home. Kicking it off here, it says language you install. You can choose your language, time and currency format. You can change this if you're choosing it from another country. And then keyboard or input method, I'm going to hit US, and then you're going to hit next. And I'm going to hit install now. Activate Windows. I always recommend, unless you have a product key, you have a Windows 11 product key, I'm going to assume that you don't. If you put in the product key, you will not have the next option that I'm going to show. But if you hit I don't have a product key, this is where you'll basically get all of these options. So you have the choice of Windows Home, Windows Home In, which Windows Home In means that it's not going to have any of the media stuff. So it won't have Windows Media Player, won't have Edge. It's like bare essential Windows. I would not recommend doing this because it is a pain in the butt to get it reset up. I would just basically set it from the standard home thing. We're going to ignore education. We're going to ignore the in versions of these and just install Windows Home. You're going to pretend like you read this whole thing, hit accept, next. We're going to do custom install. This is my 1 terabyte drive I'm going to install to. I'm just going to hit next, and then it's going to do a bunch of stuff to my drive for me. You do not need to do anything else. Okay, now if you get back and you're back at that original screen, just pull your installation media out and then restart the PC, and then you should end up in this location if this ends up being a problem. We're now going to finish installing Windows. You're in the United States, hit yes. You're going to know the answer to this. If you're here in the United States, you're going to hit yes. If you're bilingual, or if you know that you're going to use a different kind, you can go ahead and add that here. Most people are just going to hit skip. This is completely optional, or you can hit skip for now. So here we are with the all-in-one with the Microsoft account. Microsoft accounts, what they do is they're basically stored things in the cloud. And if you have a Microsoft account, then what this does is that if you've used Windows in any other location, or if you start to have multiple PCs, like for instance a laptop, and then you also have a desktop, what it can do is it can sync your settings across all of these individual devices. When it's a device that I'm going to use permanently, unlike something that I'm just setting up for another individual, then I absolutely in all cases use a Microsoft account. Now, let's say for instance you don't. You're installing Windows 11 Home, you're like, I don't want to have a Microsoft account. What you would basically put in here is no@thankyou.com, hit next, and then you could basically put in blah, whatever. You don't have to type in anyway, hit sign in, and then it'll say something went wrong, and then what it'll do is it'll create what's called an offline account. If you do it this way, what you can do is add a Microsoft account once you are later on, once you basically get into the operating system. The one thing I will say is that you will then end up with multiple user files inside of your installation. So it is better to make the choice beforehand, but if you don't want to, if you want to go through and make the decision later, you can do this. But if you just wanted to log in and you're not worried about security or anything like that, this is something that you can do where you don't require a password. Hit next, and then installation will essentially finish. Robey, what do I do? Turn all of this off. It does not improve Windows, especially this diagnostic data. Okay, so let's hit accept and move on to the next step, and then voila, Windows 11 is installed. But let me show you if you end up in a situation that could be bad where you don't have a network connection or anything like that. So let me walk you through that if you end up having that problem. So we're going to jump back and do that now. Welcome back. So let's do a version of we don't have a network connection, which is going to happen if you're on cutting edge tech. This could be a problem because the LAN driver, Windows doesn't have an automatic driver on the installation media for, so you might run into this issue. We're gonna go ahead and hit yes. So everything else is the same as what we did previously. We're gonna skip. You may not have Ethernet, and you can't hit next because it's requiring you to do a connection, but there is a way, should you be on this, to get by this. So if you hit Shift F10, it's gonna bring up this dialog right here. You're gonna type in OOBE, which stands for out of box experience, /BYPASS and then hit enter. And then it's gonna basically restart, but now this time you'll be able to go past it. Now this is where it's gonna be different. I don't have internet. This is where you get this option, which you wouldn't get before. Click I don't have internet. And then you hit continue with limited setup, and then it'll work just like what we did before. So hit Robeytech, hit next, password if you want to put one in, and then it will just finish the installation. Up to you. I'm going to turn all these off like I did before and set up for the next step. Congratulations, this should be where you're at. Now, if you do not have network, which you're looking down here and you had to do the non-network stuff, you can see here I'm actually connected to the network. What you are going to have to do is go to another laptop or desktop, go to your motherboard's web page, go to drivers, download the network driver, then on that USB that you made for Windows, just plug it in, run the installation, and then you will have network, and then you can be in the exact same spot that we're essentially at. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna click on this Windows icon. I'm gonna click on Settings. I'm gonna go to Windows Update, and I'm gonna make sure that all of these updates are done. So first thing you basically do is run all your Windows updates. I'll tell you, more than anything, you wanna make sure your Windows updates are always up to date for a couple things. One, security updates, basically make sure you have no potentials of hackers getting access, all that sort of stuff. So you wanna make sure that all of these are basically taken care of and all set up. So let's get all these done, and then we'll start the next step. You now have Windows updates. Either this says there's nothing to update, or if you hit download and install, it basically just says retry. Don't worry if it's just driver, things like this. We're gonna talk about a better way to install that anyway. So we're gonna go ahead and close that out. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna open up the Microsoft Store. And then one of the things we're gonna do here is we're actually going to update all of this as well. And there's a reason for this. So head over to your library. Even if you don't have Windows Microsoft account, go ahead and hit Get Updates, and then let this completely finish doing its installs. There is a rhyme to my reason, but the main thing is that you want any bloatware that Microsoft wants to put on, actually have it fully installed, because what we're gonna do after this is, depending on how you want to do this, is you can go through and then remove all of the applications that you don't want to just make sure that you have a clean and super fast install. So we're gonna let this run. Windows is now set up, you're actually good to go. Now, one thing I want to notice before we jump ahead and start diving into setting up Windows is that what you may have, depending on your motherboard, this happens with Gigabyte and with Asus motherboard specifically, is you'll have something pop up as soon as Windows is installed, either install Armory Crate, a Gigabyte application, etc. In all cases, if you get a pop-up right as your PC restarts, go ahead and hit yes and let that stuff fully install, because it'll do things like install network drivers and all that sort of stuff, and it'll be stuff that we use later on. Hitting no makes that a little bit more difficult. It's something you can definitely recover from, but the cool thing about a lot of motherboards, and especially with Windows installations, is that they have pre-installed stuff on the motherboard that makes setup for you a whole lot easier. Here's something that is extra. If you want to do it, this is completely optional. The things that are going to detract from the performance of your PC the most are the things that are essentially in your system tray, which you can see I have very, very little. You can take your time to cull applications. So things like Solitaire, TikTok, you can do things like Spotify, WhatsApp. There's a lot of things that it installs automatically. So you can go here and you can start looking through here. If you don't know what it is, like it doesn't sound like a game or it doesn't sound like an app or etc., then I would leave it alone. Now the next step, what I'm going to talk to you about, is going to be unique to your motherboard. In this case, we have a thing called MSI. So we're going to install an application called MSI Center. All of these are going to be very different, and you're going to have to go and look in terms of what the name of the application is so you can install it. And I'm going to search for MSI Center, and then here it is right here. I'm going to install this app, get to the point where it's essentially set up. In every single one of these applications that will install all the other drivers that your motherboard needs and your PC needs to be able to run. And this is a step that a lot of people forget to do. One warning, and this is a great place to talk about it, anything that is like install a separate app, like Norton, do not do. That is all bloatware, just don't do it. Support, and I'm gonna go to live update, and then I'm just gonna hit scan, and then you'll see here I'm gonna get a bunch of additional things that I need to install to make sure that things are up to snuff. And then see where it says this third-party stuff? This is the stuff you never install. The stuff you want to install is your chipset drivers, your Bluetooth drivers, your Wi-Fi drivers. This is your audio driver. There's your microcode and ME updates, and then your network drivers. So you want to install those, all of those. There is another option if you don't want to bother that, but it is not free, and that is called Drive Booster Pro. So this is an application that I recommend. I'll have a link down in the description below if you want to find it. And what this essentially does is it will basically scan your entire drive, and then it will show you all of the drivers that are up to date. I use this on all of my machines. It is not, I'm not paid by them. I'm not getting a kickback from them. It's just an application I really like. And if you don't want to bother with checking your chipset stuff and you want to not run any extra applications, this is something you can have on your machine and then very easily always keep your machine up to date, because there are drivers, I'm very clear, that both the motherboard manufacturer and Windows will not always update. And believe it or not, this will do a better job of keeping things up to date. But again, it does have a subscription base and you do have to pay for it. But 20 bucks a year for that peace of mind is always a good option. So Drive Booster Pro, you can check it out, and it's really easy to use. Everything is done. We're now fully updated. And the only thing I have left is my Intel Extreme Tuning Utility and Norton Antivirus, which I don't care about. The only thing that you're lacking is the latest NVIDIA driver or AMD driver. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead and open up your browser. If you're doing NVIDIA, just do NVIDIA driver download and hit official drivers from NVIDIA. If depending on what you have, in this case I have a 4070 Ti in here, and then you're gonna choose your appropriate Windows, and then you're just gonna hit search, and then you're gonna hit download. If you're running AMD, just look for AMD Radeon drivers. It's very similar to what you did here, AMD driver and support. You're gonna basically choose your appropriate graphics driver. You're gonna hit RX 7900, you'll choose your right thing, hit submit. And then what it's gonna do is it's just basically going to let you choose your OS, and you hit download and you do the exact same thing. What you're gonna do is just go ahead and run that application, and then we'll move on from there. Drive Booster Pro will do all of this for you automatically. So you do not need to worry about going and finding these drivers. So if you went and did Drive Booster Pro, you can just skip on ahead to the next section, which is just all about making sure performance and everything is up to snuff. Your PC is essentially completely set up. You've got all of your drivers, you've gotten rid of any extra software that you don't necessarily need. Now, one thing I do want to show that may be different is if you've installed more than one hard drive and you hit Windows key, it'll bring up this and you type in hard drives. You'll see this create and format disk partition. So we're gonna pop into there. And then you can see here, I've actually got a 2 terabyte drive waiting. So just hit new simple volume, hit next, next, assign the following letter, making sure no USB drivers. If you have a USB driver or USB disk or an external disk sitting in there, disconnect it and then restart this and then hit next. It'll make sure that your drive letter is assigned the next one after C, D, etc. Now at this point in time, when I go to my Windows and I go to my PC, you can see that both I can see my local disk and my games disk. The best thing to do is to install applications to the Windows drives, but you want to keep the majority of that drive empty, at least not going above 75% in terms of capacity. So there you go, I've got Windows and I've got my games drive all set up, and now my PC is almost completely ready to go. So what if I need to maintain, or if I want to see how my cooling is or all that sort of stuff, and I just want to make sure that my PC is running at max performance, or have like a benchmark to understand that? Well, the cool thing is there is an application called Hardware Info Monitor. So this is a great tool, and again, I'm installing this tool on my C drive because this is something I'll keep with Windows. This is all of your information on your PC. Now, one of the things that you always pair this with, just to test your cooling to see if you're gonna thermal throttle or anything like that, is an application called Cinebench. And then this is a free application that you can basically have to get an idea, a benchmark of how your PC is specifically on the CPU side. Now that you have Windows all completely set up, what you're gonna do now is you're gonna hit start, power, you're gonna hit restart, and we're gonna go back into our BIOS. Now what I wanna do is I wanna make sure that my extra things that are gonna help improve performance are now on. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my XMP. And then the other thing you're gonna want to look for is rebar and above 4G decoding. If you have an Asus or other motherboard, you actually might have an option up above that'll say rebar. This is actually going to have an incredible boost to performance, specifically in gaming. So you wanna go make sure these settings are turned on. One more thing, and then we're done. The only thing that you may now have, if you don't have a Windows key, is you might actually have this pesky thing that says you need to activate Windows. And Windows can be expensive. So Windows 11 Home, if you were to purchase it at Best Buy, would be $139.99. But there's a place you can go, and it's vib-cdkdeals.com. The link is down in the description below. But if you do a search here for Windows 11, you can see here, here's Windows 11 Home, and what was $131 over at Best Buy is actually here only $27.31. These are real product keys. We have verified them. They've shown me the purchase orders, and they have incredible customer service. And if you check out our Discord, discord.gg/Robeytech, you can see thousands and thousands of people have purchased their keys from here. So if you hit buy now, and you use my code RBCK at checkout and hit apply, instead of $27.31, you're now actually only paying $19.12. And the same thing is also true for Microsoft Office. So you get done, you're a student or whatever it was. Here it is, Microsoft Office 2021. What was usually $198.84, you can now pick up for $76.42. Hit buy now. You just use my code RBCK at checkout, hit apply, and then what was $76.40 is now $53.49. And then what you do is you get a product key. What you're gonna do is gonna go ahead and hit Windows, go to settings, click on activate now, put in and hit change product key. You paste your product key into there, and then boom, Windows will be activated. And congratulations, at that point in time, Windows is 100% set up. You have your BIOS settings are set up. You have no extra software. All your drivers are up to date. If you've got Drive Booster Pro, you're going to continue to get them up to date. You have a way to test your hardware, a way to test your cooling, and at the same time, you have all of your hard drives and everything ready to go. Start downloading your games and have a lot of fun. Anyway, guys, that is it for this video. I know it was a long one, but like I said, Windows can be complicated, and I wanted to make sure that you had the ultimate guide for basically getting your entire PC set up and ready to go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I would love to know down in the comments below if there was anything that I missed, anything that could be more clear. So if we're going to do this again in the future, we can just make it that much better. Also, while you're down there, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ring that notification bell, or click that notification bell, so you get a notification when and if we always post videos like this. Because not only do we do it here, but we also have a live show every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So if you want to see this done live, because a lot of times we'll do Windows installations from time to time live. So if you have questions, head over and check it out. Or if you want to just head over to twitch.tv/Robeytech, you can watch it there as well. Lastly, if you have additional questions, a great place to go is discord.gg/Robeytech. It's filled with tech and PC enthusiasts that love to help you with these very questions. And you know what? You actually might make a friend. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoy this. Follow us at Robeytech absolutely everywhere. We're on all the other social media, so you don't necessarily just have to find us for guides. If you want to find pretty PCs like what we did here, or maybe me dancing in an ice bar like we did here, you can do all of that stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks, guys.